Sasha, hello. Hello, hello.
Hello. Can you hear
Welcome
me
to.
well?
Yes, I'm here. You perfect. Welcome to Devoxx Ukraine. It is a great pleasure that you had a chance to hop into the conference and join our event. You're our hero of today.
Yeah, I'm really glad to join. It's before I participated just a participant, and today I would like to share my experience, and I'm ready to start. Okay, let me check again. Can you hear me well? Is connection good? Okay, I suppose everything is fine, so let's start. uh, Dear friends, colleagues, today I would like to propose you some more wider view on the problem of REST API design, REST API refactoring. I'm sure that most of you have good knowledge and good practice in REST API design from scratch, in best practices of REST API design. But I suppose I have a unique experience in REST API refactoring and I have an answer on question what actually we can do when we already have not the best API and how to deal with issues if we already designed, shipped it, and deployed our API, but we need some changes. Actually, I'm working with API and API design about last 5 years. I participated in several API programs in design of developer portals, and also I'm proud that I'm contributor and participant of API Competency Center in EPAM. Okay, let's quickly start from some definition what API is. Usually it's some requirements that defines how application can interact. It's a way to share some internal functions of systems. This is something that allow your application to work behalf of another application. Uh, from some point of view, the simplest maybe it's just HTTP and HTTPS endpoints. Uh, Actually, API it's a really complex subject, and we have different points of view. But API it's a really important subject. It's in my opinion, it's really the most important things in modern architecture, in modern digital transformation. So API has a huge impact on big number of users. Any change, any issue, any defect has a huge influence. It cannot be just simply reverted after publishing. You should always pay attention to backward compatibility. You always will have some unknown, unexpected user behavior, and it can break your ecosystem, your API. And it always open gates, it's always possible security vulnerability. But API is a key factor of your success. API is very important for business. It's a key for digital transformation. Business produces some valuable assets available through API. Developers develop applications and able to provide these assets and resources to end user. And these end users, from this point, also contribute to your company, to your business, to and produce new assets and resources. And all this always cycling. So that's why API is not just endpoints or some protocol. It's really part of your business, of your digital transformation. From start, I would like to remind some API design principles. We expect that API should be predictable, intuitive, and efficient. And in your design, in your architecture decisions, you should always rely on these three pylons. Okay, I'm sure that you're aware of best practices during design, and let's review some common issues that you can get after several cycles of development, after several years of your API in production, or the most popular case when you get your project as some legacy and you should deal with all these issues as is. Maybe my favorite issue is parameters hell. It's when you have really valuable assets, resources that had as many options for requesting, and you're trying to move all this complexity behind the question mark. And also from some sources you can find even an advice to move all complexity from URL path to parameters to question mark. But when you have big numbers of parameters, it really can be an issue and decrease speed of adoption of your API. But good news at this point that this is not very complex issue, and you can always find some options, some ways to improve this situation. You can use some values by default. You can try to split a single API call to several different API calls, or you can move part of not some specific or not frequently used parameters to your headers, and also propose some default values for these parameters. And from point of view of end user, your API become really simpler and more friendly. Okay, next possible issue, it's ignoring of HTTP verbs and just tunneling all your API through post or GET request. It can be maybe a good idea for security or when your API is small, but if you follow well-known crude pattern or use other HTTP verbs, your API looks really friendly and is better to end user and better for your documentation. Okay, I will not spend much time on this issue, so we go through this issue really quickly, and I would like to move to our refactoring approach and techniques. One more possible issue is when you actually work as RPC over HTTP, but call your API as RESTful, as REST API, and at this point you you provide not fair information to your developers, to your users, and they also have some not the best developer experience when they expect REST API but actually have RPC over HTTP. So just select one approach and clearly state in documentation what are you doing with your API and how it should be how your user should work with this API and what fashion you selected. And one more interesting issue in API is a really huge payload. During development, maybe we pay attention to our payload and traffic size maybe at the last point. We concentrated mostly on security, developer experience, cool design, but your result payload also matter. Because if you have some universal API, some universal resources, it can be the uh, the possible case that some user don't need all information that you returns in your responses, and at that point, good practice just allow user to select what part of response, or what part of information you need to provide in response. So good news that this issue also easy to overcome with pagination or some kind of filtering during request. Okay, let's jump to some next point. Uh, let's talk maybe about some philosophic question. Why you have what you have? Why you usually can get this not the best API? You can start with maybe best practices. You can start from scratch, but as a result, you also get not the best design. In my opinion, in my opinion, API design and API development underestimated at all. You you should know that API development is not only some interface design, documentation, or maybe SDK in addition. You should pay attention to many different things, to many different aspects during your API development and API design. Also, you should design and develop not only API for some single product, but also pay attention to whole ecosystem, to whole API program or product family of your company, of your product, of your API program. So API, it's not project. You cannot work with API as with some projects that have start, end, and after that you can only support it. You should always work with API development as with live products that always available for your users. And the best thing that you can do at this point is set up an excellent feedback loop with your end users and developers, and update and fix your API when they need it. Okay. I suppose it's slightly fast, but I'm really nervous today. So let's move to the second part of my talk. I would like to share some API refactoring techniques, some approach, some new point of view on well-known patterns related to API design and refactoring. So let's move on to this part. Okay. Uh, when you have not really good API, or this practice also useful when you just start, you really need to start from a clear resource definition. uh, Actually, your API, your resources, and your assets are connected, and the goal of your API, it's expose all this to external world, to developers who develop your applications, to users that use application and get access to assets in other restructured form. You should define cases for your for your consumers. Pay attention to documentation. Be sure that documentation contains all main cases and clear resource definition, clear description of assets and resources, of connections, and possible cases that can be used with different types of resources. Pay attention to single entities and fields. Ask yourself, are they required to end user? What how user can avoid consuming this field? What possible corner cases and bad scenarios from user point of view? How this API can be misused or abused? And the main point, give your users and developers an option to consume resources in their rate and with with low connection speed or something like this. So your API should work not only for users with good connection and with excellent software and hardware. Okay, let's move on to the next case. When you have really big domain, when you have many resources, you should review all this system and pay attention to some cluster, to some subdomains. Maybe it's a good time to split your big API on small subdomains, some on small sub APIs, and check some separate resources. Um, Maybe these resources can be optimized by splitting or by joining with other resources. And after that, your API system will be more clear and it can be adopted and discovered easier. And also don't forget to reflect all this in your documentation, because the bad thing about documentation that usually users just try your API because they expect some common pattern, something like root, and only when they have some issues they go to documentation. So your documentation should have some easy start point and explain all your system in only in one screen, in couple of sentences, and after that user should be able to understand all your idea over your API. And the next approach, the next pattern might be naive, but it's really a single responsibility. It's all like in OOP or class design. Your API calls, your resources should follow single responsibility as much as possible. It can be forced on different levels, on API level, or on domain subdomain level, on resource level, or even on, and maybe the most important, on separate endpoint level. So if you see some multiple responsibility, try to refactor, try to split, try to move it to some different subdomains. For me, it's better to have two very similar but slightly different API with different responsibilities than have all in one API. The next good pattern for navigation for API discovery is to use hierarchy. It allows to improve navigation for users in your domain. Also, you can use this hierarchy in forward and reverse direction. You can build this connection from top of your hierarchy graph or from middle, but just remember that it's a really bad idea to have more than 2 or 3 levels of connections in your URLs. But if you can provide at least one additional level to connection, it's really easier to consume your resources and get resources with some specific connection instead of building complex parameters and something like this. So it's a really good idea to move part of this complexity from parameters to URL paths. Okay, let's move on to the next API gateway pattern. So I suppose that many of you have experience with microservices and know this API gateway pattern. But the interesting point about this pattern is that it always have big influence on your API design. And the idea of this pattern is that we have additional layer between our client and our microservices or services. And this layer is a single entry point. And this single entry point, this API gateway, looks like some silver bullet. You can do many useful things on this layer. And if you have this layer, you can move some logic, some complexity, and from level of services to this layer, and also you can move something from your client layer and make your life of your clients easier. For example, on this level, you can remove some data from request response, transform request response, add some additional security controls. You can handle cache and resource consumption. You can improve security and control consumption rate. You can combine several calls, or you can split one call on several. You can improve your navigation through your resources and implement all this stuff with hierarchy on this level. So the idea that your services and microservices can work only with pure API design, with just with CRUD and resources. And on API gateway layer, you can make your API better and improve it for client consumption. The next step for this pattern, it's a backend for frontend. It's also well-known pattern from microservices. But this pattern also useful during API design, and it allows you to build special API for every your client, for every kind of your consumer. And on this with this approach, on API gateway layer, you can remove some not useful payload, not useful parameters for this specific client, and make this API really good, really the best fit for your specific mobile client, or just for this specific web application, or even for some your B2B integration point. You can provide additional special endpoints only for this specific customer. So it's really powerful pattern for management of your API, for control of your API, and most of modern API management systems built on top of this pattern. Also, when we try to sort out with API design patterns, we can find API facade pattern. And the questions when we ask at some points, and it's what's the difference between API gateway and API facades? The description often almost the same and very similar. So let me state the answer from my side and from most of sources. So API gateway, it's a specific case of API facade. The main idea of API facade, it's that is focused on on simplifying of consumption of internal systems. So facade pattern makes our system easier for integration, easier for consumption for any external system. And the next step for gateway pattern at that point, that gateway pattern also simplify our system for deep backend services. So API gateway pattern allow you to move some business logic, allow you to simplify implementation of your backend services. So the main idea of this approach is that you can move any logic, any complexity from client or from backend part to this middleware layer. And for example, some API management systems like Apigee or Kong allow really powerful tools for this task, and this middleware layer can handle a lot of different cases and have very flexible tuning, and it can be used really in backend for front-end fashion without additional development on services layer. Okay, let's move on to some next point. Let me check my timing. I hope I have more time. Okay. One more good approach for your API refactoring when you have some old API with long history, it's redesign your whole domain in case of big integration. Your architecture should be ready for minor changes and for big integration. And for me, the best type to get really bad API from integration of two systems with good API, it's when you just join these APIs and try to translate API of one system to API another. Let me add more explanation to this case. This case, I try to tell such a story when you have two big, really old system with similar DOMer, with similar design, and after some business reasons, you need to integrate these systems in one system. For example, common case when you have some ticket selling system, you have your own equipment, own API, own processing business flow. But for example, if you buy your competitor, and this competitor also have very similar system, very similar API, but this other system. And now you should integrate this new system in your old system, and the worst decision at this point just to make some simple translation. My advice at this point that you should stop and design new API approach, new API system, new API version that can handle both systems, both business processes, and can get the best from both systems and fix issues that were that were developed in these systems over the years. So for this case, when you should integrate two really big systems with own history, it's full redesign, and as a result, you can get the best API possible for this case. But if you design your system from start really ready for big integrations, this redesign should not be a big deal for you. So let me share my point of view, what refactoring workflow you should follow during your redesign. At first point, you should identify your resources and build a model of your system. The next step, segregate different subdomains in these resources, and usually every subdomain should be a separate API. The next step, you should follow best practices during API design or API refactoring for every part of your system. And then you're able to use API facade or gateway pattern or BFF. And with help of this pattern, you should make your API as simple as possible for your consumers and from your backend layer. And let me review several real-life cases that I was able to see during my work with different API system. Imagine that there is a really big company, really top leader, and this company has many different assets, many resources for internal users, for external users, for partners. And this company has a lot of different APIs. Every API has own history, was created with different approach, with different best practices. And the idea to join all these different APIs and propose consistent developer experience for all clients, for all external and internal developers, for all that can consume this API. So for me, that this was the best case for backend for front-end pattern. So to solve this issue, a layer of API gateway was added, and for every case, for every kind of client, for every customer, if it was required, was built separate product gateway. And this gateway gathered all that was required for this specific client from different internal services and APIs. And on this level was made a custom specific design of API for this specific client. So it can be a really big effort to design a special API for every client. But if you follow some main guideline, main easy pattern, and if your system ready for this redesign, So it's not very complex task, but as a result, you get really satisfied clients and best possible integration for these clients. Okay, let's move to the next case. Almost the same case from business perspective. Big company, real leader, really old company, and this company already consumed several his competitors, and about every 3-5 years this company get another part of it or buy another competitor or startup. So the company has many different core services systems. They are similar in general because all these competitors works in the same domain, but this is really different systems with different equipment, different programming languages, different architecture approach. So the task was to build some general purpose API for all customers, for all developers, but to join all these different systems and hide all this complexity from end users. So facade pattern was selected for this task, and to join all these different core systems, core services was selected to build a facade layer, a system of different facade objects, and every of these objects available for external world as some API with some responsibility. And when you add new core system, new core service that need to be integrated to hold this ecosystem, you hide this integration on facade layer, and and the API users always have consistent developer experience. Okay, I suppose that's all from my side for today. I just would go to some conclusions that it not very important what best practices or what architecture approach will you use, but always keep your API predictable, efficient, and intuitive. Predictable, they behave in a way that expected and in consistent manner. Intuitive, if they have a simple and easy interface and can be easily understandable. And efficient, if they ask for the required input and deliver the expected output as fast as possible, and nothing more and nothing less. Okay, I I know that there are some link for questions, so let's move to questions section, and give me 1 second. I will try to find this link. Let me switch to.
Sasha?
Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Okay, for us, you are today a real hero. Thank you for saving us in these difficult circumstances. I hope that you enjoyed your speech, even though it was very fast and unexpected. And we invite you to join Q&A session that you are having right now. Our technical team sent you links that you can now put out of your inbox and go right away into the Q&A sessions, and together with it we invite everyone to join you in this Q&A session. Thank you very much once again for your beautiful talk, and after the Q&A session we will have a presentation from our gold partner Playtika.